There are two types of change that can take place, psychologically speaking. And the two types of change are directed change and spontaneous change. Change that happens all by itself. We're all very familiar with directed change, which we can also call purposeful change, purposeful behaviour. If I want to pick up a glass of water, I go ahead and I deliberately pick it up. I have the goal of picking the glass up, and I enact the goal by giving instructions to my arm, my fingers, and I pick it up. So that's a fairly unremarkable type of thing to say, really, because we all know about directed change. But the really interesting thing that we don't get usually is that directed change or purposeful change is absolutely useless when it comes to psychological matters. It's good for drinking tea, because if I wait for a glass to spontaneously fill up with water and then spontaneously come to my lips so I can drink it, I'll be waiting a long time. So purposeful action is pretty damn crucial when it comes to the business of living. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about as always, the inner world, what's going on inside of us. And in that world, we can't make things happen that we want to happen, and we can't stop things happening that we don't want to happen, which goes against what we have been brought up to believe. Now, in a way, this isn't entirely true, because we have a certain leeway. I have a certain leeway in which I can make things happen that I want to happen on the inside, in the world of my thoughts and feelings and emotions and memories. Only not really, so I can create an appearance of control where there is no control. And the reason there is no control is because the artificial situation that I create can last only so long as I can maintain it by straining and striving, because it wouldn't be there anyway unless I had orchestrated it. So I need to keep on orchestrating. I can't stop orchestrating. And Jung mentions this when he says that any change that is convulsive in nature, based on the fitful exercise of our will, as I want this to happen, never lasts. It always kind of reverts back to how it was. It's like a little tantrum. It's like, oh yeah, here he is having a tantrum. And when the tantrum's done, back to square one. It was only a tantrum, flash in the pan. We can't dignify it in any other way. So to dignify our tantrums, our therapeutic, rational therapies in which we do try to achieve outcomes and we do try to change things, when we try and say that is a legitimate kind of a thing to do, in other words, we are legitimizing a tantrum, basically. But we don't see that at all, because we are so fixated on directed change that we give no value at all to change that happens all by itself. It's a kind of a blindness or a prejudice or whatever you want to call it. It's as if I'm saying, well, how can anything happen if I personally am not making it happen? In my arrogance, in my hubris, that is what I'm saying. That is the arrogance and hubris of the ego. The ego takes the credit for doing everything, even when it does nothing. And the flip side of the coin is that it has to take the blame for everything, also when it was also did nothing really, because it can't. It's not capable of affecting real change. It's only capable of having tantrums. It's only capable of creating artificial situations and maintaining them and saying, look, there, I did something. So if it's something that I want to, a situation I want to create, I feel good about it and say, hey, this is great. That's what's called being in control or being successful or anything like that, being a winner or whatever the hell. And the flip side of that is when things happen despite my trying to make them not happen. And I go, no, that's terrible. Look what I've done, or look what I've failed to do. And that's losing, that's failure of control, and I feel bad. So this is a point that is kind of maybe hard to recognize, that the life of the ego, which is our life, just so long as we think we are this sense of self that thought creates, is a life alternating between ridiculous phony feelings of satisfaction because of our supposed success, and equally ridiculous feelings of being down on ourselves, being miserable, being wretched, again because of our utterly ludicrous ideas that we should have done different or we could have done different. So the life of the ego is just made up of two unreal things: euphoria, dysphoria, both of them entirely unreal. I have this fit where I try and control things. For a while I can control it. I feel euphoria. That's where euphoria comes from. The apparent success of the ego's controlling. It's not really worth feeling good about because it gets reversed and the euphoria gets cancelled out by dysphoria. So how is that worth feeling good about? It's a waste of time. It's a ridiculous exercise in self-deception. But we manage to feel good anyway by just being very, very short-sighted and very, very narrowly focusing and not looking at the way in which it is all just a farce. So we just look in for a very short space of time and think, yes, I have succeeded. I've changed things in a permanent, desirable way, which is the best thing in the world for the ego. That's how it gets its sustenance. That's how it gets everything, from that sense that it can change things personally in a permanent and desirable way. Obviously, if I can change things permanently in an undesirable way, that's the flip side of it. Obviously, I don't really want that. But of course, it's part of it. So in other words, we oscillate between two illusions that are really the same illusion. And we align our ideas about what therapy is or what psychological therapy is in terms of control. It becomes yet another self-deception perpetrated by the ego, the image we have of ourselves. It's just another delusion. Every single person on the planet, young or old, rich or poor, whatever, we every single day, our ups and downs are created by by this illusion that the ego can do stuff. So when we think we can, we go up, and when we think, oh no, I've screwed it up, we go down. So every one of us, we're on this kind of up and down and up and down and up and down thing, and that is the mark of unconsciousness, or lack of wisdom, lack of understanding, lack of insight, however you want to put it. That up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Getting excited in a good way about illusions, getting excited in a bad way about illusions. So That's what we all do. And then we escalate that in therapy and try and make it something supposedly scientific, science-based. There's nothing science-based about it at all. We it's as if we put on the clothes of being scientific, because that's the latest flavour. Last 100 years or so. Yeah, we don't believe in spooky stuff. We don't believe in religion or superstition. We believe in science because we're smarter now than we would have been. So we dress it all up as science, but it's just unconscious behaviour, the same as every single person always engages in by default. It's just more unconscious behaviour. So scientifically based unconscious behaviour, could we say? Anyway, it's a joke, albeit a joke that we don't get. And the other type of change, we absolutely don't consider at all. It doesn't come into it. So change that happens by itself, change that I haven't contrived or arranged, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to us at all. And yet, that's the only type of change there is. The other type of change, directed change, is an illusion. It's like, as I keep saying, it's just like me having a temper tantrum or something. A futile temper tantrum. That's all it is. So the only type of change that's real is spontaneous change. We know it's real because we didn't make it happen. It's like saying, which is kind of like what Philip K. Dick says somewhere, it's like, I know reality is real because I didn't make it. It's there, independent of me, despite me. The change that is there, independent of me, despite me, that's real change. It's not me interfering, fooling myself. It's not a projection of what's going on in my head. It's actually out there. It's actually happening. It's a real thing. We don't have a lot of faith in that. We don't really, particularly in the field of psychological therapies, we have very little faith indeed in that, because otherwise, if we did have faith in it, why would we be so reliant on strategies, methods, and tricks? Why would we put all our money on tricks unless we absolutely didn't know anything about spontaneous change, which isn't a trick? There's no trickster there doing the trick. There's no. It's happening naturally. Au natural. So we could wonder why on earth we're like this. Why do we ignore what helps and put all our money on what really, really, really doesn't help? Because after all, aren't we intelligent human beings? Aren't we sophisticated? Aren't we scientific? Well, not really, because none of this is scientific. Not really. Because we're not really examining anything ever. It's like we don't care enough to examine stuff. We just go along with the flow of this idea that is prevalent in our culture. So we're going along with our cultural programming. We hardly deserve to get a medal for that. Any fool can do that, and any fool does do that, and we do it. And if we don't do it, everyone else gangs up on us and scolds us and dismisses us and marginalizes us. Here's someone who's not doing what all of us fools do. How ridiculous. What a laugh. How come he's not being like us? Or how come she's not being like us? Or whatever. If we look into it a bit, we could see why we don't like spontaneous change. Spontaneous change doesn't glorify the doer because there's no doer there. It's not purposeful change, directed change. There is the doer sitting in the throne, the glorious doer. Look, I have done. I did it. The glory of being the doer and of doing, successfully doing, the glory of that, the tremendous euphoria of that. That's what we love more than anything else. Obviously, it's what we love more than anything else. We are all about the doing. just need to take a look around us and see what we're on about the whole time, what kind of stuff fascinates us, what type of stuff we're fixated on. And it's all the doer. It's all competition, it's all games, it's all the doer. So anything that doesn't glorify the doer, well, that's no good to us, because all we care about is glorifying the doer, even though that doer is an illusion, because no one needs to do spontaneous doing. I can't take credit for it. I can't take the blame for it either, but I can't take credit for it. I could marvel at it and say, whoa, look at all this stuff just doing itself, just happening. But we don't want to do that, because that switches the glory from me onto whatever's happening, onto reality, onto the way things are actually happening all by themselves. So I don't want to give the glory away to anything else. I want it for myself. So I'm going to pretend that everything is dependent upon my wishes, my skills, my ability to control, my kudos, whatever the hell it is. It's all due to that. And that's just how things are. That's how we are. But that doesn't mean we have to try and pretend it's scientific or anything like that. It's just pure self-deception. It's just pure empty nonsense. If we're really interested in what helps and what doesn't help, and we should be interested, because when it comes to suffering, we realize that this is not, there's something that we want to be free from all that suffering. It's I was going to say it's serious. It's if the suffering gets big enough, we forget about all the rubbish. So our lives might be full of rubbish. We might be thinking about stuff which is trivial the whole time, but when suffering comes to the fore, we drop all that, because it hits us on a deeper level. So that's the time we should start looking into things honestly and with an interest in finding out what's really going on. But somehow we don't. Somehow it drives us in the other direction of wanting to delude ourselves even more. So it seems. And it's not just that spontaneous doing doesn't glorify the doer. It doesn't actually have any place for the doer at all. The doer doesn't figure. So when we say that, we realize what the true motivation for all our activity is, for our focus on purposefulness. If the doer isn't there and we are identified with this doer, then that's frightening, because all we can ever know ourselves as is the doer. And yet, to be aware of change that happens by itself causes us to be aware, not just that the doer isn't glorious and all-powerful, but that there isn't a doer. No doer is needed. There is no doers anywhere. It all just happens. As the non-dualists are fond of saying, it just happens. And that's pretty amazing. But there's no satisfaction for the illusory I concept to be had there. And that is what fear is. Fear is to do with having to let go of everything we know, everything we understand, what we understand as being who we are. We're clinging so tightly to that understanding that we have of who we are. And the reason we're clinging so very tightly, so obstinately, is because we're absolutely afraid of what might happen if we have to see a bit further than that. If we have to go a bit deeper into things and see that there isn't this doer there. someone when I was talking to someone the other day, and she was saying, does this mean if we can't therapize ourselves or pull ourselves up by our bootstraps or CBT ourselves or whatever the hell it is, fix ourselves, so we can't rely on that, we have to rely on something else? Is that something else a mystical thing? Is it kind of something we can't explain and we just have to put faith in it, just like we might have faith in religion or in anything really that we don't want to examine, but we just say, oh yeah, there's a thing, there's a higher power or whatever that will save us. But I don't think it's necessary to start talking about mysterious forces, spooky forces, some higher power. As soon as we say that, we create this kind of weird kind of attitude, the attitude of belief really, which is deadly. Belief is always deadly because belief is an artificial construct. I believe because I want to believe because I'm afraid of not believing. Therefore, I create this belief, which also creates the fear, which I know very well on some level that if I just let things happen by themselves, I will cease to believe, and the thing that I believe in will no longer seem believable, and bang, that's me, I'm finished. So belief is an example of self-deception as well. Belief is me straining to make sense of the world, to say, oh yeah, everything, there is a higher power, and etc., and that's going to make things be okay, because I really, really want to believe that because I'm afraid of the other. So we could say that the belief, well, of course we could say that the belief in the higher power is nothing but fear. Any belief is nothing but fear. And what we're talking about isn't a spooky kind of a thing. What we're talking about is just the way things are. So if you look at things being the way they are, if you look at a daisy being a daisy, if you look at a dog walking down a street, if you look at a fly buzzing against a window pane, if you look at a cloud, if you look at anything, it's just being what it is. You can call that spooky, but why would you call it spooky? It's just everything being what it is. It's just, so all there is stuff being what it is and doing what it does all by itself. That isn't spooky, that's spontaneous change. Is spontaneous change spooky? Is it God pulling the strings, orchestrating everything? Oh no, that's directed change. That's God as a supreme doer. We're fixated on the doer because we just can't bear to think that everything is just happening all by itself and it doesn't need anyone to do it, no one to be in control. So spontaneous change isn't a doing and it isn't spooky. All we have to do is just look around ourselves and we can just see that's just the world being the world. That's just life being life. That's just how things are.